Behind the glasses, Sana's life was unremarkable, and she preferred it that way. The quiet rhythm of her days spent in an antique bookstore brought her solace. Among the dusty tomes and forgotten relics, she often felt a sense of belonging. But that sense of peace was shattered the day she discovered the glasses. It started innocently enough. While organizing the store's storeroom, she came across a small, intricately carved wooden box tucked behind a pile of faded journals. Inside was a pair of glasses, their lenses slightly tinted red and the frames engraved with delicate golden patterns. They looked like something out of a Gothic novel. "Odd," she muttered, running her fingers along the smooth edges. She considered leaving them there but felt an inexplicable pull to take them with her. Curiosity got the better of her. That night, long after the store had closed, Sana sat at her desk with the glasses in hand. The dim light from her desk lamp cast eerie shadows on the walls, but she barely noticed. She couldn't shake the feeling that the glasses were meant for her. With a deep breath, she slipped them on. The world around her shifted. The cozy clutter of her apartment dissolved, replaced by a dimly lit corridor lined with portraits. The faces in the paintings stared at her, their eyes alive with accusation. A cold wind swept through the hallway, carrying whispers she couldn't understand but felt deep in her bones. She ripped the glasses off, her breath coming in short gasps. Her apartment returned to normal, but she couldn't shake the feeling that she'd brought something back with her. The first night, Sana barely slept. The corridor from her vision lingered in her mind, vivid and oppressive. By morning, she convinced herself it had been her imagination, the result of stress and too many hours spent among the eerie artifacts in the bookstore. But when she returned to the store, the glasses were waiting for her on the counter, though she distinctly remembered leaving them at home. A chill ran down her spine. Had she brought them back without realizing it? Or worse, had someone else? "It's just an object," she told herself, but her voice wavered. She decided to put the glasses back in the box and hide them in the storeroom. Yet, as she held them, the same pull she'd felt the day before returned, stronger this time. Despite her better judgment, she slipped them on again. The corridor was back, but this time, it wasn't empty. A figure stood at the far end, shrouded in shadow. It didn't move, but she felt its gaze like a weight pressing on her chest. "Who are you?" she whispered, her voice trembling. The figure raised an arm, pointing directly at her. A voice echoed in her ears, low and resonant. "You know me?" Sana tore the glasses off, her hand shaking. She threw them into the box and slammed it shut, her heart pounding so loudly she thought it might burst. The warning. The next day, an elderly customer entered the store. Mr. Shah was a regular, always browsing for rare books on the occult. He had a knack for spotting things others overlooked, and today was no different. "You seem troubled, child," he said, his sharp eyes narrowing as he studied her pale face. Sana hesitated but eventually told him about the glasses. She needed someone to confirm she wasn't losing her mind. Mr. Shah listened intently, his expression growing graver with each word. When she finished, he leaned back and sighed. "Those glasses are not mere trinkets," he said. "They are a conduit, a bridge to a world you have no business exploring. The figure you saw is tied to your own life, your past, your regrets. It will not stop until you confront it." Sana's blood ran cold. "Confront it? How?" "That," he said, "you must discover on your own. But beware, child, the more you use them, the harder it will be to escape their grasp." Descent into darkness. Despite his warning, Sana couldn't resist the glasses. Each time she wore them, she was drawn deeper into the shadowy corridor. The figure became clearer with every visit, and the whispers grew louder, more distinct. They spoke of choices she'd made, of people she'd wronged. One night, the glasses revealed a memory she had buried long ago. She was a child, standing in a schoolyard. A young girl, barefoot and dressed in tattered clothes, was crying. Sana had accused her of stealing a bracelet, a lie that resulted in the girl being expelled. The image burned into her mind, and for the first time, she felt the full weight of her actions. "Why are you showing me this?" she screamed, her voice echoing in the corridor. The figure stepped closer, its face obscured by shadows. "Because your guilt feeds me." The final confrontation. Sana's obsession with the glasses consumed her. She stopped going to work, her days and nights blending into a haze of fear and curiosity. She knew she had to confront the figure, but the thought terrified her. One stormy night, she donned the glasses for the last time. The corridor was darker than ever, the air thick with an unearthly chill. The figure stood inches away, its face finally visible. It was her own, twisted and tormented. "You cannot run from yourself," it said, its voice a mirror of her own. "Your sins define you, but they do not have to consume you. Accept them, and you may yet be free." Tears streamed down Sana's face as she reached out, touching the figure. A surge of energy coursed through her, and the corridor dissolved into light. When she woke, the glasses were gone. For the first time in weeks, her mind felt clear. The weight she'd been carrying had lifted, though the memories remained as a reminder of the choices she'd made and the person she wanted to become. But the box was still there, hidden in the storeroom, waiting for the next curious soul to open it. Story number 2. The Last Breath. It was the sort of town that people avoided after dark. Its name was Glenwood, a quiet place tucked away between the mountains. The locals spoke in hushed tones about the old house on the edge of the woods, just on the outskirts of town. It was a house that no one dared go near. They called it the House of Serpents, but that was a nickname, one steeped in fear and superstition. The real name had been forgotten long ago, buried under layers of dust and rumor. The house had been abandoned for years, the windows boarded up, the lawn overgrown. Yet, every time someone walked past, they felt the eyes of something unseen watching them. It wasn't long before the stories started, stories of a family that had lived there decades ago, and of the eerie, unnatural deaths that followed. It was said that the last family to reside there had vanished without a trace, and no one ever spoke of them again. Rashid was different. He was a young man, an outsider, a skeptic. He didn't believe in ghosts, spirits, or curses. To him, they were nothing but stories told to scare children at night. When he first arrived in Glenwood, he laughed at the locals, rolling his eyes at their warnings. He was determined to prove that the tales of the House of Serpents were nothing more than fantasy. One crisp autumn evening, Rashid decided to do what no one else dared to do. He made his way to the house, determined to spend the night there. He wasn't afraid. After all, he was rational, logical. Ghosts didn't exist. The moment he stepped onto the property, he felt it, a strange chill in the air, something out of place, like the world itself was holding its breath. But he shrugged it off, walking up the crumbling path to the front door. The house loomed before him, dark and imposing, as if daring him to enter. Rashid pushed open the front door, which creaked loudly, echoing through the silent house. Inside, the air was thick with dust, the smell of rot and mildew hanging heavy. The faint light of the moon filtered through the cracks in the boarded-up windows. It felt as though time had stood still in this place, frozen, stagnant, abandoned. He explored room after room, each one more suffocating than the last. The floorboards groaned beneath his weight. The shadows in the corners seemed to shift and move. He laughed nervously to himself, trying to convince his mind that it was just the wind or his imagination. But deep down, a part of him knew something wasn't right. After what felt like hours of wandering, he came across something strange, an old, framed photograph on the wall. It was faded and worn, but he could make out the faces of a family, a mother, father, and 2 young children, their smiles frozen in time. The photo was strange, too strange. The people in it, their eyes, they weren't quite right. They looked too alive, as though they were staring right at him. Beneath the photo, written in a scrawling hand, was a message. "If you are here, your end is near." Rashid froze. His pulse quickened, and he suddenly felt the weight of the house pressing in on him. The air grew colder. A sound echoed through the silence, a soft, rasping breath, as though someone, or something, was standing right behind him. He spun around, but there was nothing there. His heart pounded in his chest. He tried to calm himself, but the feeling of being watched was overwhelming. His eyes scanned the room, but there was no one, just shadows. And then, it came. A voice, low and distorted, like the sound of something dragging itself across the floor. "You woke me up." The voice was harsh, almost guttural, and yet, somehow familiar. Rashid's stomach twisted. His breath caught in his throat. Who are you?" he managed to stammer. A shadow appeared at the far end of the room, slowly taking form. It was a figure, barely visible, draped in darkness, its shape ever shifting. Rashid could feel it in his bones, the cold, suffocating presence of something ancient and evil. "You shouldn't have come here," the voice whispered again, now clearer, louder. "Now it's too late." Rashid backed away, his feet stumbling as he tried to reach the door. But the door, it was gone. The walls had closed in. The windows were boarded up tighter than before. Panic gripped him. He could hear the sound of heavy breathing, closer now. And then, footsteps. The figure was moving toward him, slow and deliberate. The shadows around it seemed to writhe, as if alive. Rashid turned to run, but his legs wouldn't move. His body froze, his heart hammering in his chest. The figure reached out, its hands long and bony, with fingers that seemed to stretch like vines. It grabbed him, pulling him closer. Rashid could feel his breath, shallow and desperate, as the world around him grew darker, colder. A voice, distant and cold, whispered in his ear, "You'll never leave." And then, silence. The next morning, when the sun rose over Glenwood, the house was still. The winds were calm, and the birds were singing. But when the local sheriff came to check on the abandoned house, he found something strange. A cell phone, its screen cracked and smeared with something dark. And on the screen, a photo, a picture of Rashid. But in the corner, there was something else, a faint, ghostly figure, standing behind him. The same figure from the photo. The sheriff's eyes widened as he read the caption beneath the picture. "The Last Breath." And from that day on, no one dared go near the House of Serpents, not even to take a picture. The beast, the knock of fear, the beginning. It was dusk, and fear loomed over the village. Everyone was inside their homes, doors shut tight, and talismans hanging on the walls. Every night, a new body would be found, and no one knew who the killer was. People said there was a beast that thirsted for human blood. Azhar, a journalist, had come from the city to investigate the case. Inspector Raza, who had been working on the case, was pleased with Azhar's arrival, as he needed someone who could think logically and stay away from the village superstitions. "Azhar, the people here only speak of the beast, but no one has seen it," Raza said. "If it's a human, we'll find him. And if it's something else, we'll face it." Azhar replied with a smile. The first murder scene. Azhar and Raza arrived at a corner of the village where a body had been found. The condition of the body suggested that it had been attacked by some wild animal. There were claw marks, broken bones, and everything about it was strange. But near the body, a strange line had appeared on the ground, forming a pattern. Azhar took a photo of the pattern and said, "This pattern doesn't look like the work of any ordinary animal. This seems like some kind of curse." Raza dismissed it, saying, "Curses are just the village people's imagination." The village story. Azhar spoke to the villagers, and they all insisted that it was the result of a demonic curse. One of the elderly villagers told him, "Years ago, a magician came to this village. He deceived the villagers and used human sacrifices for his magic. When the villagers killed him, his soul was trapped in a talisman. Whoever touches this talisman becomes the beast." Azhar thought of it as a mere tale, but he sensed there was some truth behind it. The first encounter with the beast. In the dark of night, Azhar and Raza were hiding near a forest when they saw a shadow moving between the trees. The shadow slowly approached them, and when it came closer to the light, both of them froze in shock. It had the shape of a human, but its eyes were filled with blood. Its hands had long claws, and its face, though human, looked like that of a beast. Who could this be? Azhar whispered. The beast let out a loud scream and ran into the forest, but a talisman fell to the ground. The mystery of the talisman. Azhar picked up the talisman and stared at it. The pattern on the talisman was the same as the one near the body. Azhar was now convinced that this talisman was the key to the mystery. As Azhar studied the talisman through the night, he realized that it was filled with dark powers. There was only one way to destroy it. Take this talisman back to the place where the first magic was performed. Climax, the final confrontation with the beast. Azhar and Raza decided to take the talisman to the old place the elder had mentioned. But as soon as they arrived, the beast was already there. Once again, the beast appeared in a human form and said, "Don't stop me. This talisman keeps me alive. Azar tried to reason with it, but the beast had transformed into a bloodthirsty creature. In the final moments, Azar broke the talisman. As soon as the talisman shattered, the beast let out a scream and vanished into the air. An eerie calm settled over the forest. The twist ending. After the story ended, Azar and Raza returned to the city. But one night, Azar noticed the same pattern on his hand that had been on the talisman. He realized that the talisman's curse had now entered him. The end. There was a strange light in Azar's eyes, and he smiled the devil's influence. Azar had returned to the city, but something had changed within him. There was a strange smile on his face, and his eyes gleamed with an eerie glow that had never been there before. One night, when he was alone in his room, he noticed the same pattern on his hand that had been on the talisman, the same pattern that had once been hidden on the talisman. Azar's heart skipped a beat, but he shrugged it off. Gradually, strange changes began to take place in Azar's life. His thoughts, his attitude, everything had shifted. He no longer held on to the past, and whenever someone spoke of the talisman or the beast, he simply smiled. At night, Azar started hearing a strange voice. It wasn't anyone else's voice. It was the voice of the beast that had once been trapped in the talisman. Azar began hearing this voice coming from deep within himself. Each day, his soul grew more and more influenced by the talisman's eerie energy, and he could feel it happening. The first hunt. One day, Azar invited his old friend, Raza, over. That day, Raza noticed something in Azar's eyes that was completely different from the person he had once known. Azar's face had changed, as if someone else had taken over his body. Raza thought to himself, had Azar really destroyed the talisman? Did its demonic influence enter him? Raza asked, Azar, are you okay? There's something strange about your eyes. Azar replied with a smile, Yes, Raza, I'm perfectly fine now. But you won't understand what I've become a part of. When Raza realized that Azar had changed so much, he tried to talk to him. But Azar was already far removed from the friend he once knew. The second hunt. One evening, Azar invited Raza again and said, Tonight could be a night to remember for you. Raza thought Azar simply wanted to talk, but when they went together on an old path in the forest, Raza saw that Azar had transformed into the very beast. Azar no longer had a human face. His eyes were filled with blood, and his hands had long claws. Raza's heart raced with unease, but he tried to maintain the bond of friendship. Azar said, Raza, you need to understand that you had a choice. If you had walked with me, you would have kept your human life, but now you won't understand me. Raza realized that Azar had become something else, and it was now impossible to stop him. The final confrontation. When Azar revealed his full demonic form, Raza thought that he would never get his friend back. But Azar, threatening to take his own life, said, It's over for both of you now. Raza understood that the only way to save Azar was to take the talisman back to the place where his soul first became influenced by it. Climax, breaking the talisman again. Raza made the decision to take Azar to the old place, the place where the curse had first taken hold. But when they arrived, an eerie scene shook them to their core. Azar, now fully transformed into the beast, attacked his old friend Raza. This is under my control now, Azar growled. I don't want anything from this world. I just want to keep my soul alive. Raza broke the talisman that Azar held. As soon as it shattered, Azar's face returned to its human form. He vanished, but in his eyes remained the same demonic glow that had once been in the talisman. Final twist, Azar's influence. For Raza, this was all too difficult to bear. He had broken Azar's talisman, but Azar's soul was still alive. One day, Raza noticed the same pattern